Imagine this: a narrow city street after rain, a neon sign humming, a door without a name. Inside, laughter moves like candlelight. The air tastes of sugar and smoke. A piano does not play a song so much as it sighs, and a girl, hardly more than a girl, tilts her chin to the ceiling and lets the small gold world inside her breathe. They called her a flapper. Not a queen, not a saint, not a villain. A flapper. A word that sounded like a bird trying to take off with shoes still tied. Tonight, we walk with her. Not the legend, not the caricature, the person. We will listen to what she kept in her pocket. We will learn what the city asked of her and what she refused to give. We will read the secrets written in powder on the mirror after midnight. This is a soft story. It will not hurry. Let the night be slow. The year is somewhere between 1922 and 1926, depending on who is telling the story. The Great War ended, but the echo is still in the stairwells. Men came home with quiet eyes. Women had learned how factories sound and how paychecks feel in the palm. One law tried to dry the country, and another gave women the vote. Radios appeared like small hearths that did not need fire. Cars were everywhere, a new kind of horse that never slept. And into this comes the figure we think we know. The bobbed hair, the short dress, the long cigarette, the fast talk. But the surface, like any surface, is just a door. Behind it lived ordinary hours, rent to make, breakfast to fry, a mother's letter never answered. A stain on the carpet in the rooming house she could not afford to replace. Behind the sparkle, a budget. Behind the cheeky grin, a breath held for a beat too long. She wakes in a room that is not quite hers. The wallpaper peels at the window corner, the shape of a small map of a country she will never visit. The landlord says the building is safe, and the building says nothing. Morning light pools on the floor and stops at her shoes. They are scuffed. She remembers to be pleased by that. New shoes are for the rich. Scuff marks are for people who go places. On the dresser, a compact case, the size of a cookie. Inside, a mirror with a crack like a fine white river. The powder is pale as a secret. She dabs it on. Not to become someone else, but to declare herself awake. Lipstick next. Dark, almost plum. She tried red once. It made promises she could not keep. She pins a hat to her bobbed hair. The hat is not important. The pin is important. It holds. By day, she is an office girl. A type. Letters, invoices, numbers that add up to a boss. Her desk is a ferry that takes words from one shore to another. The keys tap out a rhythm older than jazz. Click, clack, return. She is fast, not because she loves the work, but because being slow makes the day longer. A colleague comes, ain't misbehavin', under her breath. Another keeps a photograph of a dog propped against a stapler. Our flapper keeps no photographs at the office. She believes that pictures can be hungry. They eat the moment they were meant to save. At noon, she eats an apple and a joke with a girl named Millie. Millie's hair is the color of tea. Millie says men are a kind of weather. You carry an umbrella or you don't. Our flapper laughs, then grows quiet. She knows that weather can flood a town. Afternoon drifts. A man from accounting tells a story about his brother's car. Another man asks where she goes at night. She says home. He says, which one? She smiles without teeth. The office clock is a warden. At 5, it releases them all. Dusk. She walks. Not toward the speakeasy yet. First, to the river, because water forgives. People drop days into water all the time. The river takes them and never asks why. She leans on the railing and watches lights begin to appear in the windows of buildings, like thoughts someone decided to keep. Across the street, a shop window holds a dress she will not buy. It has beading that would catch the light like a handful of stars. She doesn't need a dress to be a story. She needs a story to be a dress. The door to the speakeasy is painted the color of forgetting. It has a bell with a quiet ring. Inside, the room is a ship. It rocks not on water, but on conversation. The bartender does not look like a priest, but he knows more confessions than most priests ever will. The room holds a piano, a corner table, a mural someone painted after a certain drink, and the promise that for a little while, laws are suggestions and suggestions are law. She is not alone. Not here. Flappers do not travel in packs. They travel in constellations. Scattered, bright, connected if you step back far enough and draw the lines. Here's one, leaning against the bar, talking with her hands. Here's another, belly laughing at a joke she is telling herself. Here's a third, staring at the pianist the way a bird stares at a statue it has not yet flown. Our flapper finds a chair with one loose leg and settles it with her foot. The room smells of citrus peels and confidence. A server brings something clear in a short glass. It is legal to be thirsty. It is not legal to be quenched. People will say the flapper was reckless. They will call her fast and foolish and free. They will forget to say she could read a room quicker than a dealer counts cards. They will forget that every laugh in a place like this is also a calculation. Who is safe? Who is watching? Which exit is closest? Where the floorboards squeak? How to tilt the head to hear a whisper across the table without seeming to listen. The band starts small. A piano feels for the path. A cornet finds it. A drum brushes time like a cat along a shin. The song is not loud. It is a stairway. Step by step, the room climbs. She dances. Not the wild movie dance, not the cartoon tangle. A quiet, exact dance meant for small rooms and short nights. Her shoes know when to stop. Her hands know when to be empty. Her breath knows when to keep a secret. The city never truly sleeps. It only lowers the volume. And in one small room, behind a door that sticks when it rains, our flapper returns. The hallway bulb hums above her like a tired bee. The carpet smells faintly of dust and soap. Her key catches once, twice, then turns. Inside, the air has been waiting for her. She drops her purse on the chair and lets her shoulders fall. The silence is not empty. It's heavy with everything she didn't say today. She lights the small lamp, the one with the shade painted in roses that used to be red. The light lands on the mirror, on the powder tin, on the note she left tucked in the frame. Do you like to listen? It still asks. She sits by the window, unlacing her shoes. Her ankles ache in honest language. Outside, a trolley sighs past. Someone laughs 2 streets away, the sound arriving late. This is the hour when bravery shrinks back into skin, when makeup becomes mud, when the body remembers it is only human. She opens the drawer. Inside are small reliquaries of a modern saint, a ticket stubbed from a film she never finished, a button that doesn't match anything, a tiny silver cross that no longer belongs to a church. Each object hums its own story in a language made of fingerprints. On the table lies her notebook. The cover is soft, The pages smell faintly of pencil shavings. She writes not letters, not confessions, just sentences that might turn into air. I danced because standing still felt like drowning. I lied kindly once. Tomorrow I will wear courage instead of powder. She closes the book. No need for signatures. The future rarely checks them. Every flapper had 2 wardrobes, one for daylight, cotton, logic, politeness, and one for the night, silk, invention, and risk. But she also had a third, made of thoughts, dreams stitched from radio songs and magazine pictures, stitched so tight that even shame could not unpick them. She changes into a slip, turns down the blanket and lies still. The city's hum seeps through the thin walls like a lullaby made of machinery. From another room comes the faint rhythm of tap shoes practicing, because somewhere, someone is always chasing tomorrow. Her eyelids close halfway, enough to watch her own thoughts drift by like parade floats. In one, she's driving a roadster toward a sunrise that looks suspiciously like applause. In another, she's back at the office, typing the word freedom and not being corrected. In the last, she's simply sitting here doing nothing at all, and for the first time, that feels like enough. Dreams are the quiet rehearsals of history. While the world writes laws and headlines, the sleeper edits them in secret. She dreams of a dance floor with no men, only light, of women in pearls and laughter forming constellations with their hands. They spin, and the air itself becomes a partner. She dreams of doors that open both ways, of mornings that ask, "How are you?" and mean it. Outside, a radio from the neighboring building drifts through the wall. A preacher's voice speaks about virtue. He says it lives in quiet women and clean rooms. She smiles in her sleep because she knows virtue lives here too, in the ache of her feet, in the truth of her hunger, in the courage of showing up again tomorrow. At 3 a.m., the rain stops. The city holds its breath. Even electricity seems tired of pretending to be light. She stirs, half awake, and whispers a single word, maybe a name, maybe a prayer. No one hears it but the wallpaper, and that is enough. The wallpaper has heard worse. Voiceover, softer. In the morning, she will rise again, tie a ribbon through her hair, drink coffee strong enough to start a rumor, and walk back into the clockwork world as if it were her idea, because, in a way, it is. The papers will keep printing jokes about flappers. Men will keep writing songs about them, half in awe, half in fear. But the truth will live here, in a small rented room, in the notebook under her pillow, in the way she breathes when she finally sleeps. She is not history's headline. She is its heartbeat. And if you listen carefully, very carefully, you can still hear it between the ticking of the clock and the sigh of the city. Good night, little revolution. Tomorrow, the music begins again.
The city stretches like a cat under a warm blanket. Windows blink open one by one. A kettle sighs. A train complains softly in the distance. It's morning in 1924 or something close to it, and inside that same narrow room, our flapper wakes before the sunlight fully remembers her name. The dream has left behind a trace, not words, not images, just a feeling that her life is happening faster than anyone expected. She lies still for a while, listening to the heartbeat of the building. Pipes clinking, floorboards breathing, someone downstairs practicing being alive. For a few seconds, the world feels suspended between sleep and story. Then the clock clears its throat. She sits up, ties her hair with the ribbon she found in a department store bin for 10 cents, and smiles at her reflection. Not because she likes what she sees, but because she survived another night without giving up on herself. Mornings were the real test. At night, anyone could be a legend. In daylight, you had to be a person. She folds the blanket with the precision of a soldier, puts on her sensible shoes, and opens the window. The air smells of bread and newsprint and small beginnings. Across the alley, a boy is brushing dust from a bicycle. He whistles a tune that never quite finds its melody. She hums along anyway. Harmony doesn't need perfection. It only needs a place to rest. Downstairs, the landlady sits like a monument to rules. She eyes the flapper's dress, the hem still slightly too short for polite society, but says nothing. Respectability and rent money have always had an uneasy truce. Outside, the morning crowd is a living river. Men in hats, women in coats, children with paper bags for lunch. She steps into the current. Every sidewalk in this city is an audition for who you're becoming. The cafe on the corner already smells like hope disguised as coffee. She buys 1 cup, black, and drinks it standing by the window because chairs cost extra. A man reading the paper beside her mutters something about modern girls. She smiles into the rim of her cup. If only he knew how ancient modern girls really are. At the office, the typewriters wait like obedient pets. Each key has a sound, tiny thunder, a click that says, "You belong." She takes her seat, rolls a sheet of paper in, and begins to type her small part of history. Invoices, receipts, memos, nothing dramatic, yet everything necessary. The world runs on boring miracles. Her boss passes by, nods, and drops another stack on her desk. He never remembers her name, but always remembers her speed. She takes it as a compliment. Better to be fast than forgotten. On her lunch break, she sits on the steps behind the building, the city's spine buzzing all around her. She eats an apple and shares a cigarette with Millie, the same friend from part 1. Millie talks about a movie star she swears looks just like her. Our flapper laughs. She doesn't say it, but she knows Millie's dream is necessary. Without dreams, the day would feel too heavy to lift. After work, the light changes character. The city's edges soften. Office windows stop reflecting rules and start reflecting clouds. This is her favorite hour, the in-between, when no one knows if it's still today or already tomorrow. She walks to the library. The librarian wears glasses that look like they could disapprove in 3 languages, but lets her in anyway. She drifts through the aisles, touching spines of books she cannot afford to own. Every title feels like a door slightly ajar. She opens one, a room of one's own, and feels something catch in her throat. Maybe she doesn't need the whole world. Maybe she only needs a door that locks from the inside. She reads about women who wrote under names not their own, about rules disguised as customs, about courage that never made the papers. For the first time, she realizes her life is not an exception. It's a continuation. When the librarian says, "We're closing," she thanks her as if the woman has just lent her time itself. Outside, dusk stands waiting in a mauve coat. The first streetlight flickers like it's unsure how much truth to reveal. She takes the long route home, past the flower stall, past the couple arguing softly about dinner, past the jazz club where a trumpet is already clearing its throat for the night. She doesn't go in. Not tonight. freedom doesn't always mean dancing. Sometimes it just means walking without permission. Back in her room, she sits at the window again. Same chair, same air. Different kind of quiet. She watches the city lights arrange themselves into constellations of purpose. She realizes that the stories people tell about flappers will fade, but the feeling won't. The feeling will travel through decades, through every girl who cuts her hair, through every woman who decides what her own laughter means. It's strange, isn't it? The decade that called itself roaring was built from whispers. Tiny rebellions no louder than a breath. They didn't topple governments or win wars. They changed the temperature of being alive. They taught the world that stillness can be resistance, that joy can be serious, that ordinary women could be the architects of modern time. She finishes her coffee, leans her head against the window frame, and closes her eyes. Outside, someone laughs the kind of laugh that becomes legend if you tell it right. She smiles. The city smiles back.
freedom is never free. It costs silence, patience, misunderstanding. It costs the space between who you are and who the world still thinks you should be. In 1925, the bill arrived in headlines. Editors called them reckless daughters. Preachers called them modern Eve. Even mothers whispered that lipstick was the first step toward chaos. Men who once danced with them now wrote essays about decline. The same cameras that adored their smiles turned and accused. A nation fascinated by freedom began to fear it. And yet, the flappers didn't argue. They just kept living. They understood that rebellion spoken softly lasts longer than revolution shouted loud. One Sunday afternoon, our flapper bought a newspaper, folded it beneath her arm, and walked to the park. She found her name there. Not hers, but all of them. Modern girls, city girls, working women. They were being measured, debated, priced. Every article tried to define them. She realized then that once the world names you, it begins to own you. So she decided to rename herself every morning. Not with words, with choices. The press wanted scandal, she offered grace. The preachers wanted confession, she offered silence. The city wanted her pretty, she offered purpose. Each refusal was a small revolution, invisible in daylight, but powerful in memory. She wrote again in her notebook, I am not the future. I am the present, refusing to disappear. At the corner cafe, she met Millie again. Millie was wearing pearls she hadn't earned yet, and joy she absolutely had. They talked about nothing, which, between friends, is the same as talking about everything. Millie confessed she was tired of pretending every night was perfect. Our flapper smiled. Maybe perfection is just good lighting. They laughed until the waiter smiled too. Sometimes that's all resistance needs. Two women laughing where silence was expected. But not all laughter survived. In Chicago, police raided clubs for indecent dancing. In New York, laws threatened to fine any woman who smoked in public. In Boston, headlines warned parents about the new female. The country wanted progress, just not after dark. The flappers learned to move between lines, obedient by day, infinite by night. They were bilingual in respectability and rebellion. It was exhausting, but it was also art. And then something unexpected happened. Fashion followed them. Movies imitated them. Advertisements sold their image back to the same society that mocked them. Freedom had become profitable, and like anything profitable, it was suddenly respectable. But imitation isn't immortality. It's camouflage. She watched her reflection in a store window, surrounded by mannequins dressed like her. It felt strange, being both inspiration and warning at once. She wondered if history always eats the people who feed it. That night, she returned home and found another note under her door. This one said, "They are listening." No signature, no explanation. She smiled, folded it twice, and slipped it into her notebook beside the line about refusing to disappear. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like confirmation. Outside, the world kept arguing about women, as if womanhood were a public property, a law waiting to be written. But in rooms like hers, in rented corners and dim stairwells, a quiet evolution kept breathing. They were typing, painting, driving, teaching. They were unlearning obedience one paycheck at a time. and no headline could capture that. Freedom, she realized, is not the absence of rules. It's the ability to choose which ones deserve you. When she looked in the mirror, she saw not scandal, but stamina. The endurance of every woman who ever whispered, maybe later, and finally said, now. She didn't need to win. She just needed to last. So she dusted her hat, tucked the note deeper into her book, and blew out the lamp. The dark welcomed her like an old friend. Tomorrow, the world would still argue about the cost of freedom. She would simply keep paying it in laughter, in work, in unbroken sleep.
The decade is breathing slower now. You can hear it in the clubs, songs ending half-finished, laughter pausing before it begins again. The jazz age is still awake, but it's tired. The music that once swaggered now sways. Even freedom has circles under its eyes. Our flapper sits at her window, the same one we've known all along. The glass trembles each time a streetcar passes, as if the past is trying to call her name. Outside, the posters are changing. New faces, new promises. The city wants another dream to sell. She folds yesterday's newspaper and places it beneath the leg of the wobbly chair. Small repairs, the art of staying upright. In her notebook, the ink from old pages has begun to blur, but the words still hum through the paper, alive, restless. It's 1928 now, give or take a heartbeat. Skyscrapers have begun to grow like steel flowers. Men in suits rush upward, chasing invisible numbers. The city smells of gasoline and ambition. Every conversation ends with the word future. And yet, inside the jazz halls, you can feel something shifting, the rhythm turning brittle, the smiles rehearsed a little too often. Prosperity has become a costume, and everyone is trying to look their size. Our flapper walks through it all, quiet, graceful, observant. She still goes to the speakeasy, but now she listens more than she dances. She has learned that revolutions grow tired too, that even joy must rest. One evening, she meets Millie again, older by a few heartbreaks and a new job at a department store. They share coffee and chipped porcelain cups. Millie talks about customers who want to buy happiness in small boxes. She laughs, but her eyes stay somewhere else. "Do you ever miss it?" Millie asks. "The wild nights?" Our flapper smiles, a smile that has seen too much to belong to youth. "I don't miss it," she says softly. "I carry it." They fall silent, two women in the middle of history, watching the glow of a decade slip through their fingers like champagne fizz. At home that night, she turns on the radio. The announcer's voice is confident. The market is booming, new records sold, new machines built. The country is invincible, he says. She listens not for the words, but for the tone. Confidence always sounds the same before it breaks. Outside, thunder gathers far away. Not the kind that comes from clouds, the kind that begins in banks. The next months move strangely. The city feels taller, heavier, louder, like a song turned up too high. People buy things they don't need. Money moves like music, fast, seductive, unseen.
Our flapper keeps typing in her office, her fingers dancing across the keys while numbers march towards something none of them can see. She starts keeping her pay in a small envelope inside her shoe, not out of fear, but out of instinct. Old lessons die slowly. Freedom taught her to have an exit. Then, one crisp morning in October 1929, the world simply forgets how to stay upright. The papers say market crash. People on the street say everything. Stocks fall like careless promises. The music pauses mid-note. Our flapper stands in front of a newsstand. The headline looks back at her like a mirror. She thinks of all the nights she danced under ceilings that were never built to last. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe everything that rises too fast eventually learns gravity by name. That evening, the club is quieter than usual. The band plays slow songs because fast ones feel like lies. The bartender polishes the same glass for 10 minutes. Millie arrives late. Her store has closed early, maybe forever. They sit together at the corner table, the same table where laughter once spilled like champagne. Will it ever come back? Millie asks. Our flapper looks around, at the smoke, at the half-empty room, at the band playing Courage Through Exhaustion. It never left, she says. It just learned to whisper. After that night, the world changes its costume again. Skirts grow longer, colors fade, the word fun becomes suspicious. People start saving buttons, reusing ribbons, counting spoons. The decade of noise becomes an echo, faint but faithful. Our flapper finds work in a library, filing books by names older than her city. She likes the quiet. After years of shouting for freedom, she enjoys the sound of breathing without fear. Sometimes, at closing time, she runs her fingers across the spines of books she's never read. She wonders if someone 100 years from now will open one and find her there, the woman who danced through the storm and kept her footing when the floor gave way. She is not famous. She is not forgotten either. She lives in the corners of photographs, in the smudge of lipstick on a teacup, in the crease of a song sheet folded and stored too long. Every generation invents its own flappers. Different clothes, same courage. Girls who laugh too loud, boys who cry without apology. People who decide that living honestly is worth the scandal. The jazz age becomes a ghost. But ghosts have patience. They wait for someone to listen again. One night, years later, our flapper, older now, softer around the eyes, finds her old notebook. The pages smell like dust and memory. She reads her own handwriting with a kind of disbelief. So young, so certain, so brave without knowing it. I am not the future. I am the present refusing to disappear. She laughs quietly. The line still feels true, maybe even more now than then. She closes the book, sets it by the window, and watches the city lights blink like punctuation marks on a sentence the world keeps rewriting. The world outside hums with new inventions, radios, planes, microphones, films that talk. The 1930s arrive not with applause, but with a deep exhale. The people who danced through the 20s now learn to walk again, slowly, on careful ground. But the memory of jazz lingers in hips, in hearts, in the rhythm of ambition. It's there in every click of a typewriter, every whistle of a kettle, every soft rebellion that begins with the words, "Why not?" Freedom once scandalous, has become ordinary, and that is the flapper's greatest victory. She closes her eyes. It could be any year. It could be every year. The music changed, but the pulse remained. You can still hear it if you lean close enough to the silence. And so the hidden lives of flappers drift into legend, not as headlines, but as heartbeats that refuse to quit on history. They were not saints or sinners. They were translators, turning boredom into beauty, turning restriction into rhythm, turning ordinary days into possibilities. When people say the jazz age ended, they meant the decade lost its calendar. The spirit never left. It just changed address. If you walk down certain streets after midnight, you can still hear the echo. Heels clicking in time with a distant trumpet, a laugh that sounds too alive to be a ghost, a whisper that says, "Keep going. We started something."
Morning arrives like a letter without a stamp, and she opens it anyway. The city is cooler now, the kind of cool that tucks itself into sleeves and under collars, the kind that makes people look twice at the sky as if the weather might give them an answer. She ties her hair back with the ribbon that has lost its color but not its duty, and steps out into a hallway that knows her footsteps by heart. The railing wobbles, the stairs complain. The front door is the same heavy breath it has always been, but the street beyond it is gentler, almost expectant, as if the day has decided to be kind for once. She walks to the market because hunger is honest work. The fruit man has apples that make promises with their shine. She buys two and puts them in her bag like small moons. On the way home, she passes the shop that sells secondhand books and pauses at the window where nothing is arranged and everything is waiting. A book lies open on its spine as if it had tried to fly and thought better of it. Inside, the owner nods without asking what she needs. He knows the difference between customers and pilgrims. She drifts along the shelves, touching the titles lightly, the way you touch a child's hair when they are almost asleep. Something quiet pulls at her. She finds a thin volume no bigger than her hand, a diary written by no one famous, a woman from a town with a name like a lullaby. The entries are brief as breaths. Today the bread rose. Today the rain did not. Today I did not cry. She buys the book because it is an honest sort of courage and slips it into her bag beside the apples. On the corner near her building, an old woman sits on a folding chair selling needles and mending thread. And because it is a gentle day, our flapper stops to ask about the weather. The old woman says the weather is as it has always been, obedient to no one, stubborn, sometimes cruel, mostly indifferent, but now and then it remembers to soften. She buys a spool of thread the color of good tea and walks on, thinking about all the things that stay together because someone bothered to mend them. Back in her room, she opens the window and empties the light onto the floor. The thin diary waits on the table like a bird that has decided to trust her. She sits and reads slowly, as if the words were a fragile kind of bread, breaking off small pieces and letting them dissolve. Between the lines, she hears a rhythm she recognizes, the sound of a woman keeping herself alive with little rituals no one writes about. She takes out her own notebook and writes a sentence that feels like a ribbon through both books. I remember so I do not go missing. She makes a pot of coffee strong enough to surprise her. While it sings on the stove, she takes the hem of her only good dress
and threads the needle with the tea-colored spool. Her stitches are not elegant, but they are faithful. It is a small kindness to the future, this careful line the color of patience, and when she finishes, the dress looks like it has decided to last a little longer. She hangs it near the window to catch the sun and dries her hands on a towel that has been washed into honesty. In the afternoon, she takes the long way to the library because the long way offers more to forgive. On the steps, she meets a girl who cannot be more than 17, hair cut blunt and brave, eyes bright with the kind of hope that doesn't ask permission. The girl asks if the library is hiring. Our flapper shakes her head gently and says not today, perhaps next month, perhaps after that. The girl nods like someone who has not learned how to be discouraged and thanks her as if thank you were a secret handshake. Our flapper watches her go and feels something like a soft spark catch under her ribs. She remembers what it felt like to treat the city as a dare and answers herself in a whisper. Some dares are worth keeping. Inside, the stacks lean toward her like familiar trees. She sorts returns, slides cards into their pockets, reads the titles as if taking attendance. A man returns a thick novel with a weary expression and says he did not finish it. The hero would not stop talking. She smiles without judgment and tells him some stories require 2 readings and some require none. And he leaves lighter because understanding is a kind of liberty. At closing time, she sweeps a strip of dust no whiter than a sigh from beneath the last shelf and locks the doors while the building cools around her, grateful and old. Evening is unwrapping itself when she reaches the street. She takes the ribbon path again, passing the bakery just as the last loaves are stacked like warm bricks. Across from the bakery is a small school, its yard empty, its swings still as commas, and she pauses at the fence to look at the chalk ghosts on the slate board. Sums and misspellings, small hands learning the world by mistake. The janitor waves with the easy dignity of a man who keeps things clean without expecting gratitude, and she waves back, feeling a steady fondness for every invisible profession that holds up the visible ones. At home, the room receives her with its customary draft. She sets the apples on the table, the diary beside them, and lights a small lamp because the evening has decided to be tender. She takes out a sheet of paper and begins a letter to no one in particular and to everyone who might need it. I have learned, she writes, that memory is not a museum. It is a garden. You must take care of it, or it grows what it wants. She folds the page and does not look for an envelope. Some letters only ask to be written. There is a tap at the door, a courteous rhythm that belongs to tenants who have learned each other's lives by sound. Millie enters without waiting, carrying a box shaped like an apology. Inside is a dress she cannot wear now that the store has closed and compliments have become a luxury. She lifts it carefully. The fabric is a faded whisper, beadwork missing in constellations. They spread it on the bed and sit on either side, sewing in companionable silence, their needles moving in a choreography older than complaint. When they finish, the dress is not new, but it is honest. And Millie laughs the way a person laughs when something fragile has chosen to survive.
They talk then, not about what is missing, but about what remains. The names of streets they have memorized by smell, the satisfaction of a clean sink, the comfort of a lamplight that works every time you ask. Millie asks if she regrets anything. Our flapper thinks for a moment, then says she regrets those nights she apologized to furniture when it creaked.
as if she were a trespasser in her own life. They hold the laugh carefully between them and then let it go. After Millie leaves, the room settles again. She gathers the thread and the small bent pins and drops them into a tin decorated with roses. The tin is dented and faithful. She winds the clock one slow turn and sits by the window with the diary and her own notebook open like two hands facing the sky. On one page, today, the bread rose. On the other, I remember because I belong to myself. She copies this sentence and draws a thin line beneath it, as if underlining could fasten time to the page. Night climbs the wall and rests on the ceiling. Below, the city compounds itself into a lullaby of ordinary noises. A wagon on cobbles, the soft shout of someone late, laughter from a room that believes it is alone. She unpins her hair and places the ribbon on the sill to cool. The ribbon is frayed. It will do. She brushes out her hair slowly, a small ceremony that honors every hour spent being seen and every hour spent recuperating from it. Sleep comes like a visitor who did not knock, but brought flowers. In that gentle dark, she dreams without drama. She dreams a room full of women in soft shoes, reading letters they wrote to themselves and answering them tenderly. She dreams a city whose laws are built like porches, places to welcome. She dreams a morning that asks what kind of day she needs and waits for her answer. The dreams do not solve anything. They do something better. They refuse to make her smaller. When she wakes, it is to the sound of a kettle deciding to sing. She rises, ties the ribbon, and pours the day into a cup. Outside the window, a sparrow practices success on a strip of gutter, and she applauds it privately. On the table, the thin diary lies open to a blank page that looks like a small lake of possibility. She writes one simple line. Today, I will be kind to the part of me that is tired. Then she underlines it and draws a little box beside it and ticks the box, as if the promise were already kept. She leaves early to walk the long block where the city keeps its portraits of itself. Windows filled with faces of past seasons, advertisements already nostalgic for yesterday. On a poster, a girl with bobbed hair sells soap with a smile that belongs to her and also does not. Our flapper nods to the girl the way one actor nods to another as their stages pass in the dark. Thank you, she thinks. We did what we could with the time we were given. At the library, a girl from the steps appears again, hopeful, tired at the edges, asking if perhaps today there's work. Not yet, but soon, she says, and the girl tries to look as if soon were an answer and not a horizon. Come back tomorrow, she adds, and because the world rarely says those words with care, they both feel a little larger for having heard them. The day unfolds in reliably unremarkable ways. A boy loses his card and finds it again in the pocket he did not check. A woman asks for a book on gardening and leaves with a book of poems that will water her instead. An old man returns a thin volume about the sea and says he can taste salt again when he reads it. And she tries to imagine what it means to have your memory explained to you by a wave. She writes the title down for later, not because she loves the sea, but because she loves anything that teaches a new way to remember. Evening follows as faithfully as a dog that knows the shape of your walk. She closes the library and steps into a street carrying the last light in its pockets. At home, she eats one of the apples, the crisp sound echoing in the small room like applause, and sets the other on the windowsill for tomorrow. She opens her notebook and writes another letter to no one and to everyone. We did not end the world's arguments, but we learned to outlast them. She folds the page and places it under the thin diary, as if layering kindness could make it heavier, harder to lose. She takes the dress from the hook and slips it over her head, the mended hem warm against her knees. In the mirror, she looks like herself, and also like a forecast, the kind of weather that will end in sun because it says so. She stands there a long time, practicing the art of not apologizing to her own reflection, and the mirror, grateful, does not argue. When the moon rises, it rises in simple language. The night is not a stage anymore. It is a room with the light left on. She sits at the window one last time, opens the thin diary to the first page, and runs her finger along the first sentence until it begins to glow. Today, the bread rose. She smiles because sometimes that is miracle enough. She chooses a page in the middle and writes a small history of her own in the narrow margins. I was here. I stood up. I kept going. Then she closes the book and sets it beside her own. And together, they look like two hands that have decided to hold on. Across the alley, a woman sings something too small to be a song and too important to be silence. The tune is work. The tune is rest. Our flapper leans her head against the frame and thinks of all the women who kept a note going even when the music changed. She thinks of the girls who will read one line in a thin diary and see themselves, and of the boys who will learn softness from women who refuse to disappear. She thinks of the old woman with thread and the young woman with questions, and of herself, a quiet bridge between them. When she finally lies down, the day does not resist her. She breathes the way trees breathe when no one is watching. The room is not elegant, but it is faithful. The future is not guaranteed, but it is listening. She closes her eyes and makes a small promise to the morning. I will remember. I will mend. I will remain. And in the gentle hours that follow, the city turns itself over and lets the night air freshen its corners. Somewhere, a letter is written and not sent. Somewhere, a dress is mended and worn until it learns the shape of a life. Somewhere, a girl with new hair and new questions is told to come back tomorrow. And she does, and tomorrow keeps its word. The women who remembered do not stand on pedestals. They keep kitchens clean and notebooks near. They sew and teach and count and carry. They whisper the story forward while the world is busy declaring endings. When history looks back, it will not find them by their headlines. It will find them by their handiwork. The hems that held, the rooms that warmed, the diaries full of weather and bread and small, stubborn mercies. And if you listen closely to the quiet between clocks, you can hear them still, keeping time not with drums, but with breathing. The decade has folded itself into memory, but memory refuses to stay folded. The city keeps whispering the same small stories through new windows. Children grow where music once stood, and their laughter carries the same rhythm that once belonged to jazz. Our flapper has learned the art of stillness, though stillness does not mean silence. It means knowing when the world can move without you for a moment. She has aged the way oak ages, graceful, patient, slightly astonished to still be standing. The lines at the corners of her mouth are commas, not periods. They keep the story going. She spends her mornings reading, her afternoons walking, and her evenings letting the kettle sing to her instead of a radio. Sometimes she hums along, out of habit, because melody has muscle memory. One afternoon, the postman leaves a letter addressed in an unfamiliar hand. The paper smells of dust and ambition. It is from the young girl who once asked about the library job. The girl writes that she found work in another town, that she dances on weekends in shoes she bought with her own pay, and that she keeps a diary because someone once said memory was a garden. Our flapper reads the letter twice, then leaves it on the windowsill where sunlight can finish reading it too. She thinks of all the girls who came after, girls who no longer needed permission to laugh, who cut their hair because they liked the wind on their neck, who walked into rooms expecting to be heard. Each one is an echo that sounds a little clearer. History, it seems, is not a chain, but a choir. When night comes, she lights a single candle and opens her old notebook. The pages are yellowed and stubborn. They still smell faintly of ink and cigarette smoke. Between old notes, she adds a new one. We were never the noise. We were the courage that made noise possible. She smiles at her own handwriting, smaller now, but steadier. Outside, the street has changed its clothes again. There are cars where carriages used to be, and new faces where her friends once stood. The air carries the perfume of gasoline and progress. She watches a pair of young women hurry past in trousers and laughter, and the sight fills her chest with something quiet and bright. The world has taken its time, but it has come closer. She blows out the candle and lets the dark settle. In that darkness, she can still hear the old music, faint but faithful, like a heart continuing a conversation long after the words have ended. She whispers a small thank you to the city, to the girls, to the ghosts who learned to dance, and closes her eyes.